So welcome everyone to our IPM talk with Ginny Rosenkranz. I'm going to go over the logistics before we get started, and then I will turn it over to Marsha for an introduction. So for those of you that I haven't been able to meet yet, my name is Stephanie Poley. I'm the state coordinator for the Master Gardener program, and thank you so much for taking your time this evening to join us. We have a pretty big crowd. We've actually got 130 guests on with us and counting. Folks are still joining us as we speak. So we're really happy to have such an awesome crowd here learning about such an important part of our landscape management. So just some logistics. This is a webinar, so you won't have the ability to turn on your camera or your mic. So that is expected. If you don't see that option, it's no problem. The way that you can communicate with us is through the chat and also the Q&A. And based on what you're using, if you're on a computer, you'll see both of those options at the bottom of your screen. So if you want to communicate with fellow participants, or if you have any technical difficulties, you can use the chat. If you have a question about the content that is being presented, you can send that in for Ginny using the Q&A, and then I'll do a Q&A session with Ginny at the end of the session to answer all the questions that have come in. But don't feel like you have to wait until the end of the session to send your question. If something comes up while you're watching the presentation, just go ahead and submit your question using the Q&A whenever you have it, and we'll get to it at the end of the presentation. Jay, would you like to say hi to everybody before I turn it over to Marsha?
Of course. Hi, everybody. Just happy to be here and happy to hear what Ginny has to say.
So Jean's our program management specialist. Most of you have probably met her either in a webinar or via email. So we always love to have her introduce herself so everyone can put names to faces. Yeah. All right, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Marsha, who is from our Baltimore County Master Gardener program.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie. And thank you so much for supporting this presentation this evening. Before I introduce the speaker, I wanted to say a few words about an upcoming Baltimore County Master Gardener event. On Saturday, August 7th, from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m., we're encouraging you to visit the Baltimore County Master Gardener Fest, taking place at our demonstration garden, which is located at the Baltimore County Maryland Agriculture and Farm Park. That's 114 Schwann Road in Cockeysville, 21031. The Garden Fest event occurs in conjunction with the Hereford Junior Farm Fair. So there will be lots of other activities going on related to agriculture. In our demonstration garden space, you will discover a variety of gardens, including vegetable, pollinator, herb, baywise, children's fruit trees, and deer resistance. So if you have an opportunity on August 7th, please come out and join us. We'd love to have you visit. So I wanted to introduce Ginny Rosenkranz and welcome very much. Ginny has worked for the University of Maryland Cooperative Extension since 1994 as a commercial horticulturalist and Master Gardener Coordinator in Somerset, Wicomico, and Worcester counties. She has her BS in Botany from the University of Maryland College Park and her MS in Horticulture and Extension Education from the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. Ginny assists greenhouse growers, nursery growers, landscape contractors, garden center operators, and golf courses with best management practice, integrated pest management, and production issues. She teaches an annual Master Gardener course that attracts about 10 to 20 interested citizens a year. She also produces Delmarva Gardens, a 30-minute garden show that is available on public access channel PAC4 and on the extension umd.edu Wicomico County website. Delmarva Gardens offers up-to-date monthly gardening information. Jenny also has a monthly segment on plant care and gardening on the local CBS station, WBOC TV in Delmarva Life. I can't think of a better person to do our presentation this evening, a common sense approach to pest control, IPM. So thank you very much, Jenny, and I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you very much. And it's great to be here. It's always an honor, in my opinion, to be asked to give a presentation to another group of people who really, really like plants, because I always feel that we are just amongst such good friends. When I talk to my master gardeners and I say, well, I'd love you guys to go ahead and set up a plant clinic. You always have to have 2 at a plant clinic. And they look at me like, why? I said, hey, if nobody's around, you can always go ahead and talk among yourselves about gardening. How bad could that be? And they always laugh and say, that's always good. And they've always said that they've had such a wonderful time getting to know this new person. And then they become fast friends. So that's really good. And I'm sure that that goes for all of you guys who are master gardeners throughout the state. Well, I love this, the title of A Common Sense Approach for Pest Control using Integrated Pest Management, because it basically makes all of us plant detectives. So put on your Sherlock Holmes hat, get out your microscope, and let's go ahead and get going. See if this works. All right. All right. All right, oh my goodness, there we go. All right, so integrated pest management, what does that stand for? Well, it's basically a balancing act. You want to go ahead and be able to balance all the different control approaches you can have to control certain pests. So you can have cultural, you can have biological, you can have chemical. All of those are possible, but you should probably look at some of the ones first. And I would always say, know that chemical solutions should be your last resort, because there's always other ideas out there. The main thing about integrated pest management is knowing what the pest is. I know this sounds crazy, but I have had my landscape contractors send me, phone calls, emails, or just bring in something and say, I have sprayed this fungus 3 times and it just isn't working. And I'm looking at their sample, I'm going, well, it's not a fungus, it's a woolly aphid. And a fungicide is never going to go ahead and take care of an insect. And they look puzzled, like it never occurred to them to look further. So it's really, really important to be able to identify what kind of pest you have. And we're going to go through that too. So having the knowledge in here is really great, but what you need is knowing where to find what you need to find. And the Master Gardener Manual is an amazing, amazing source for that. So identifying the problem, figuring out what you need to know about that, and then assessing how much you should do to control this. So it is all kind of a balancing act, or like this, I love this picture with all the people playing music together. It's all, music. Okay, so when you do a pest control, there's all kinds of pests that are out there, and I'm going to kind of go through them bit by bit. So I'm going to start out with weeds, because weeds are a problem outside, whether it's spring, summer, winter, or fall. And the reason why I say that is because we do have winter annuals as well as summer annuals. And again, knowing what you've got is really important. So for the winter annual weeds that they have, the one that I have right here, I hope you can see my cursor. It's on the lower left. That is it's purple dead nettle, and it is a winter annual. It will germinate actually in August. So knowing that it germinates in August means that if you're going to use a pre-emergent control to prevent those seeds from germinating, you have to do it before the fall. You have to do it in August. And as we're getting warmer, that might actually kick it back into September, but right now I don't think it does. So all of your winter annuals, and there are a whole bunch of them, you need to look at when they actually germinate. And then for the summer annuals, it's important to know if they're monocots or dicots. Okay, basic botany, you guys remember that. A monocot is a plant that has 1 leaf blade when it germinates. So that would be anything in the grass family, okay? So that would be like crabgrass, which is the one right there, right in the center. Crabgrass is called crabgrass because once the soil gets to be between 50 and 55 degrees in the springtime, and it gets a little bit of sunshine on that seed, bam, it germinates just that quickly. It's just like a nanosecond. And as soon as it gets those roots into the ground, it starts growing deep roots as soon as it can. And then it starts putting out lots and lots of leaves. Well, the leaves are important because one of the things about crabgrass is that it wants to go ahead and spread itself out. The reason why it's called crabgrass is it spreads out like like a crab puts out his claws. And what it's doing is basically hogging the area. It's hogging all the sunshine. It's hogging all the nutrients. It's hogging all the water. And it's making it really, really impossible if it was a lawn for a lawn to be happy. And this one, of course, is in a mulch bed, so it's easy to see and easy to get out. But if you don't take the time to get it out, boy, it gets to be more difficult every time you play with it. The one on the far right is a dicot, and that means that it has 2 leaves and it germinates. This one is called black medic. It looks an awful lot like the trifoil. It looks an awful lot like oxalis, but the reason why it's called black medic is that the seeds are black. And this one, even though it's an annual, it almost acts like it's a perennial one because it just seems to take over forever. I have a picture of it in gravel because it can live in the lawn, it can live in a mulch bed, and it can live very, very happily in gravel. So knowing that this is an annual, though, gives you a head up because it only has one life to live. But because it's an annual, it's going to put all of its energy, all of its energy, I should say, to growing. So it's going to establish really strong roots. It's going to establish really good foliage. And as soon as it can, it's going to throw out flowers, and the flowers are going to throw out seeds. So you can see, even though the crabgrass is not flowering right now, this black medic is. It has these little teeny yellow flowers, and it's ready to go crazy. So you need to control this before it actually goes to seed, or you will be dealing with a lot of seeds next year. Okay, the next type is what they call a biannual. And a biannual is a type of weed that the first year it puts together like a rosette of basal leaves. And right down here in the bottom left-hand corner, this is kind of the rosette of basal leaves. This plant right here, you might recognize it. This is called garlic mustard. And this germinates really early in the springtime, and it's very, very strong grower. The first year it has its basal leaves, and the leaves are rounded. Notice that? It has a very strong fragrance of garlic. And it doesn't do the seeds the first year, but because of the scent of garlic, it is very, very good at deterring deer from eating it, because deer are not into garlic. I know a lot of Italians like onions and garlic, but deer are not Italians, and they do not like the onions and garlic. The second year, it can go ahead and it grows from the basal root up, and it throws itself up with lots of foliage and then also flowers. So here are the flowers up here. And when it has a second year growth and it's more upright, these leaves are more triangular and they're not as much of a garlic fragrance. That's because the first year those roots were getting really well established and it's holding on. So the second year, it's well established, it's throwing out all those flowers, which are throwing out all those seeds. The problem with this is that even though the deer would say, well, you're kind of tasty, I'm not sure, they're not going to be able to really pull the plant out by the roots because those roots are so well established. And the other reason why this is such a problem as a biannual is that it germinates so early and it spreads so thickly, it actually inhibits the growth of all of our native spring plants. Okay, so the next, of course, would be a perennial. And perennials are, well, let's put it this way. They spend their first year growing really good sized roots. So here's a picture of Canadian thistle. This is a perennial. We don't have as much of it on the Eastern Shore as you guys do have it in the Baltimore and further areas. But this is an experiment that was set up by one of the universities. And they planted one seed, and within this one seed, this is not even the full summer, but this is one summer's growth. Well, not even a whole summer's growth of roots. And this is the whole top right here of the plant. So when you think about that, a perennial sometimes can really take off. We have a couple other perennials down here. This one right here is called Creeping Charlie. Once you have it, it is very difficult to get rid of. And this over here is wiregrass. It's very, very popular here on the Eastern Shore. Not, but anyways, it does take over a lot on this shore. So what is the difference between a perennial and a biannual and an annual? Okay, the first year it really gets those roots established and it gets the top established. By the second year, it's ready to kind of really cruise on. By the third year, well, you've heard the term first year sleep, second year it creeps, third year it leaps. Yes, by the third year, that perennial is going to be more and more difficult to control simply because the root system is so well established. So it's kind of like, oh my gosh, I wish I'd taken care of that earlier. So here's one of the reasons why you want to control things. With an annual, like foxtails an annual and pigweed is an annual, these two can put out this many seeds, 34,000 seeds for foxtails, 110 seeds per plant per year for pigweed. Now, the only difference between foxtail and pigweed is the pigweed seed can stay viable in the soil for more than 10 years. Yike. Okay, dandelion, that is a perennial, but 15,000 seeds per plant per year. And this is a perennial. So these are reasons why we want to be able to figure out if the pest is a weed. What type of weed is it? Is it annual, biannual, perennial? Let's get on top of it before it becomes a real problem. Now, some people also say, well, a weed is just a plant without a pest agent. Well, this is one of my favorite plants. This is a columbine, but this is our native columbine. So it throws seeds all over the place. And it might be in an area where you don't want it. So some people will say, wow, that is a weedy plant. And other people say that that's absolutely an amazing plant. So is it in the right place? If it is, let it grow. If it isn't, The reason why I have this beautiful cut leaf Japanese maple here is that I did have a landscape contractor call me all upset because he had been taking care of a property that had been sold. The new owners had looked at this absolutely gorgeous cut leaf Japanese maple that was 10 feet high and 20 feet wide and said, I don't want to cut it down, get rid of it. And he was almost, the landscape contractor was almost in tears. And I said, well, first of all, it's not hers. I mean, it's hers now, it's not your friend's. And second of all, it's not what she wants. So to her, it is a weed. So that was terrifying, but it happens. So with controlling an annual, biannual, or perennial, you just need to know the life cycle. And we've kind of gone over that, but there are different types of controls. Okay, physical controls. These are the things you might want to consider first. Hand pulling, put gloves on first, unless you really like to get your hands dirty. You can use a hoe, you can use, I bought at the Master Gardener training day last time that had one of these sickle holes. It is wonderful, I absolutely adore it. But whatever you do, you want to go ahead and get as many weeds out before they even go to seed. Once they've gone to seed, oh my goodness, you're going to have to worry about the seeds you already have. So always put them in a plastic bag to go to the landfill. If they're not in flower or not in seed, you can pull them up and you can put them in the compost, which is just fine. Now, the reason why I put down biological control is that there are some plants that have biological control. There is an invasive vine called the, one of the common names is terethum, and it has little teeny seeds on it. The leaves are triangular. It grows about 10, 15 feet high, but because the little berries are very tasty by birds, it spreads all over the place. So because this was an invasive, they looked at some biological control. And this little guy right here is a weevil. And he ends up eating holes in the leaf so that it can go ahead and be controlled. And that is one way of doing it. Now, it doesn't really control it totally, but what it does is it slows the growth down and it weakens the plant. I wonder if anybody has guessed the name of this weed. We'll keep on. Okay, so there are chemical controls. Now, I put down soaps and oils because there are some soaps that are designed to be used on some weeds. It only controls young annual weeds. There are certain oils that people are using right now. I know they're sold. I don't have a lot of faith in them. You can control things by nutrients, by reducing the amount of nutrients for them, but If they're in a planting bed or if they're in your lawn, you want to keep the nutrients really good. The other thing you could do that I didn't put down would be a flamer, depending on whether the plant is in gravel. If it's in mulch, you don't want to do it unless the mulch is good and wet. You never want to use a flamer in your house or your garage or any place like that. So you do have to be kind of careful. Now, if you're going to use chemicals to control weeds, keep in mind, remember the monocots are grasses, the dicots are broadleaf weeds, and there are chemicals that you can go ahead and use that will only kill the monocots, only the grasses. Now, I know there's a lot of monocots, like for instance, you can use liriope as an example. It looks like grass, but it's not. And there's sedge, it looks like grass, but it's not. So if you have sedge, you have to use an herbicide that only takes out sedges. If you have grasses, you can use a herbicide that only takes out grasses, and it will not destroy any of your other plants. Always read the label though, because the label is the law, and you want to make sure that your weed is on that label. Okay, so another pest, well, insects. Well, insects and slugs and snails. So these are all pretty much what they call exoskeletons. So they have their skeleton on the outside where we have our skeleton on the inside. So right here, we've got two pests. This is two different life stages. This one right here is the cabbage moth, and he's having a blast on this little pretty pink flower. And here is the actual larva. It's a caterpillar. And the reason why I have the life stage here is you have to figure out what is the best life stage of a pest to take care of. When we were talking about weeds, we talked about the best life stage is when they're really, really little. As soon as they germinate, that's the best time to get them out, but nobody has that kind of time. So with this type of pest, caterpillars or insects, again, with any insect, the life stage that's the easiest to control is when it's gone from the egg to the first larva. So even something like a gypsy moth caterpillar, which can get to be 2 inches long and eat an entire oak leaf, just chop, 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 chop in about 5 minutes. The best time to control that gypsy moth caterpillar is when it was first hatched out, when it was teeny, teeny, tiny. Same thing for bagworms. So again, there's lots of different control options. And one I thought, well, it'd be kind of fun to show you what you could do. So a lot of people who have issues with bugs, they don't want to step on them. They don't want to squish them. They don't want to squish them with their hands. Totally understand. So what you can do is you can get a mug of water and put a drop of soap in. Doesn't have to be this particular one, but a drop of soap, liquid soap. And then anything like this little caterpillar, you can go ahead and toss it in. Or Japanese beetles early in the morning, they are not really good flyers. Just scrape them all in, threw them in. I would suggest a pail of water rather than a coffee mug. You don't want to be drinking that. But that is one control that you can go ahead and do that is not going to be a chemical control. That is what you would call a manual control. So when you're looking at the pests, though, there's a couple of different things, especially with insects. Some insects have one lifestyle, kind of like summer annuals and winter annuals. They only have one life season. But then with insects, sometimes you can have multiple generations. So for instance, this guy on the far left right here, this is the gypsy moth caterpillar. And I took this picture just this year because we had a huge outbreak. And you can tell it by these bright red right here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pairs of those. And I think 3 or 4 pairs of the blue dots right here. They're real fuzzy. And when you look at their face, it kind of looks like a lion's face. It's really kind of cool. But thank goodness it only has one generation a year. The reason why this one is such a pest, though, is it actually hatches out really late in the year. It hatches out in June. So it feeds on the trees in July. And so when the new leaves come out, because you know oak trees and other trees usually have 2 sets of leaves. The first set is wonderful, and the second set is like, you know, the ace in the hole. If all else fails, I've got this other leaf. It comes out in June and July, and the temperatures are hot. And sometimes that new leaf emerges and it gets sunburnt right away and crisps and dies. So that's not good. Okay, here's another one right here that, thank goodness, only has one generation per year. This is our Japanese beetle. It's actually a very handsome beetle. It's very, very pretty. It's very metallic looking, green and bronze, very, very handsome, whether it's a female or a male. Of course, it has a voracious appetite, just like the hungry, hungry caterpillar. It seems to eat all day, all night. Now, this one is not the young one. So this gypsy moth caterpillar. This is the larva. So this is the maybe the fourth generation of the larva. So that the first generation and the second generation were the good ones to go ahead and control. But this one right here, this is the adult. He's big, he's strong, he's husky. You don't want to be trying to spray him because first of all, he can fly away. And second of all, it doesn't matter what you throw at him. He's going to just shrug it off. What the heck? Now, some of you might buy one of those Japanese bags, Japanese beetle bags, so you can collect them. I understand from some people it's very satisfying collecting those bags of dead beetles. But keep in mind that those wonderful little beetle bags have two pheromones, and pheromones are like perfumes. So the first one is like, hey guys, we're having a party, we're serving food, and the beetles will come. The second perfume says, hey guys, we're having a party, we're having an orgy, and then the beetles come. And it doesn't matter whether it's guys or girls, they still come. So you have these two perfumes or pheromones that are pulling these Japanese beetles right to your house. They wouldn't be coming if you didn't have those pheromones. So leave the Japanese beetle bags at the store, and early in the morning, get a little pail of water, add a drop of soap, throw those little beetles in there. And then keep in mind that the best time to take care of these guys is when, after they've laid their eggs and the eggs hatch, which would be the end of August into the 1st of September. And they'll be really close to the soil surface, easy to take care of them. You can take care of them with a chemical, but you can also take care of them with a naturally occurring bacteria that will take out just those beetles and nothing else is harmed. So these are things you need to know. Okay, to the far right, these are aphids, and they have what they call multiple generations every year. One of the names for these aphids is a common name is called plant lice because they just seem to generate like crazy. Well, they do because these are all female and they give live birth to more females. So it gets to be kind of crazy for a while. It's a real big party. So sometimes you also have to think in mind that not all bugs are bad. So I wanted to go ahead and share this real quick with you. Okay, you all have seen this. This is the bald-faced hornets. Everybody goes, oh no, but actually these are awesome. They're excellent pollinators, but even more so, one of their favorite foods is caterpillars. So they spend their whole spring and summer collecting caterpillars to feed to their babies, removing the caterpillars out of your garden. Okay, this little guy is a mason wasp, and he is a pollinator here. And here's another one. This is a thread-waisted wasp. These are both awesome pollinators, and they don't even sting people. They're not into that. And these guys right here are little teeny wasps, the brachypod wasps, they're not pollinators, they're predators. And so what they've done is they've gone ahead and laid their egg inside this caterpillar, which probably you don't want to have anyways, because this is a tomato hornworm. They lay their eggs in, and when the egg hatches out, this is the larva, and the larva is basically controlling this caterpillar. Caterpillar wants to say, oh, I have so many predators on me, so many pests feeding off me, I want to stop eating. But it keeps saying, no, 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 you eat, because you have got to have all the nutrients that are feeding my babies. So it's kind of interesting. Okay, then we also have a lot of other insects that are so helpful to us. So you have to be aware of them and welcome them into your garden. You might not want to be friends with them, but you still want to welcome them. So here's the dragonfly. I just love this picture of the dragonfly. Dragonflies are actually awesome because when they're larvae, they're in the water and they're eating mosquitoes. When they come out as an adult, they're in the air and they're eating the mosquitoes in the air. What better could you do? It's wonderful. I always say hi to my dragonflies. Over here, ladybug beetles, they eat their weight in aphids every day. And what they'll do is if they come to some aphids, they'll taste a couple aphids. And if the aphids taste not food, they'll fly over somewhere else. But if they find a plant where the aphids have just started feeding on, they'll go, oh my goodness, perfect for my babies. They'll lay their eggs, and their eggs are little teeny oval, bright yellow eggs. And when those eggs hatch out, the larvae look like little teeny, I would say, alligators, but they're black and orange. And they have their legs spread out like alligators, sorry. And they eat their weight in aphids every day. So they're wonderful. I've had people who say, well, I want ladybugs, but didn't know what the larvae looked like. So here's another one. A lot of people do not like spiders. And I understand that, but spiders are the wolves in the bug family. So this one right here with the orb spider, He's just taking advantage of whatever flies into it. But there are spiders that live inside the shrubbery and they actually go out and look for and attack and kill these bad bugs. Well, this one is a really good bug. This one is called the wheel bug. You can see right here, see the wheel right there? He is definitely a very strong predator. He has very large legs, which allows him to really run fast, just like a wolf. This part is his head, and this thing right here is his beak. And what he does with that beak, he just jabs it into the body of a caterpillar or another bug, and he just literally sucks the life out of the bug, kind of like a horror movie. This right here is the egg masses of the wheel bug. So I just wanted to show that to you. So if you ever see something like that, it's very geometrical. So if you see that, let it be. It's a good guide. Also, lightning bugs. I mean, who doesn't love lightning bugs? Now, they don't do much, but the larvae, oh my goodness, they're predators. And here's some soldier beetles. Yes, they're mating, but you know, sex in the garden, what can I say? It's easier to get a picture of two bugs like that because they're not moving away from you. But the soldier beetles and the Hoover flies right here, both of those are really good pollinators, but the larvae are really good predators. So when you take a look at them, don't think, oh, bad bug, squish, squish. Think, was that one of the soldier bugs? Was that one of the Hoover flies? And also praying mantis, everybody knows what they are. And here's one, here's his face, and he's chomping down on a bug. And here are the egg cases of the Chinese praying mantises. Now these guys also are generalists, but they still do a good job. So how do you find your pest? Well, you want to be able to look on the top of the leaves, you want to look on the underside of the leaves and do some research. Like for instance, these are impatiens. Nowadays, they come with downy mildew. You'll never see it on the top because pouty mildew grows on the top. Downy mildew grows on the underside of the leaf. There's a lot of bugs that like to hide on the underside of the leaf. So get out your magnifying glass. Okay, so again, more pests. Here's a bagworm. This is definitely a pest. This is on a rose. You don't ever expect to see bagworms on roses, but you need to open your eyes and again, start looking through your landscape. If you have any narrowleaf evergreens, around the 1st of July, circle your calendar. I'm going to be out there looking for those little teeny bagworms. Best time to take care of them when they're teeny tiny, when they're like less than like 1/8 of an inch large. Okay, this guy in the middle, this is a prickly rose slug. And it was on my rose and it was having a feast. And of course, it skeletonized the leaves. What can I do with that? Oh my goodness, I turned the hose on it, washed them off. They have teeny tiny legs. They couldn't get back up, gone. Okay, just today, I took this picture of one of my hibiscus. Notice what the Japanese beetles did to it. It's very lacy, not really pretty. But the nice thing about hibiscus is they're going to throw out more leaves. More about Japanese beetles. I'm sorry, this is the Japanese beetle time of year. So here's the Japanese beetle on one of my roses. And you can see that he's feeding on the rose, but he's also already fed on the foliage. And the foliage already has a disease on it. Oh my. So, you know, what can I say? You need to go ahead and take care of them. But the time again is not really now unless you go out early in the morning and dump them in a pail of water. Okay, on the other hand, here's the Eastern tent caterpillar. This came up early in the springtime. And these guys have this wonderful tent to keep them from the birds. Best way to take care of these guys? Well, open this up. If it's close enough for you to take a stick or a strong spray of water, open up this tent area. And the caterpillars are gonna go, oh my goodness, and they'll run away. And the birds will say, oh, thank goodness. Because when you think about it, early in the spring and the summer, when the birds are laying their eggs and they have these little baby birds, the best baby food for birds are caterpillars, packed with protein and soft, no hard edges, perfect for baby birds. Okay, and then today I also looked on another hibiscus. I have quite a few hibiscus. And this is what I found. This is a sawfly. And so you think, okay, a sawfly, well, that's a bad thing. But sawflies, well, they're more like in the ant or the bee family. They're not really flies, but they can actually do a really good job. They usually live on the underside. Oh my goodness, I just noticed it actually has 2 sawflies on here. I took the picture because I saw this one. I'm just now seeing that one. See, you've got to put your glasses on. Anyways, what they'll do is they'll kind of create window painting areas. So like these little spots, these brown spots on this side, this is the upper side of the leaf. And this is where they were feeding on the underside and they can only eat just a little bit. As they get larger, they can eat a larger piece of the leaf. But that's one of those signs you can look on and say, wow, I've got some brown spots. That looks like window painting. Turn it over, you'll find the sawfly. Well, there are other pests that are also have an exoskeleton, like the snail right here. He always carries his little shell. And here's a lovely slug. And what do they like to do? They love the hosta. And hostas are tasty and they have soft, delicate foliage. And so they just eat. Notice how they're staying between the veins. The veins are more difficult to chew. And these guys don't worry about that. They have this whole leaf to eat. So these are pests that you can go ahead and take care of. Now, how do you take care of these? Well, you're not going to step on them, I hope, but there are different baits you can go ahead and put down. There are other different things you can do. Some people like to put down beer, and I'm not really a fan of that. I have a dog. I don't want him getting drunk. I have 2 cats. I don't want to get them drunk. But there are different things you can go ahead and do. Some people just put down like a square, and every evening they'll go ahead and pick up the square, or every morning, I should say, they'll pick up the square and they'll scrape all the slugs and snails into a bucket of soapy water. So that is a control you can do without any chemicals. So again, you want to look at the entire life stage of the insect. You want to check out what kind of physical control you can do. Spushing them into a bucket of soapy water, picking them off, squishing them on the ground. However, you can go ahead and take them off. Biological control. Part of that is knowing what you're dealing with. Like with the gypsy moths, what they're using for biological control is a naturally occurring bacteria and also a virus. It didn't work this year because even though we had a lot of rain, we didn't have a lot of humidity early on in the season. That's why the gypsy moths are going crazy. But biological control is also all around us. And sometimes something like this ladybug larva is the best biological control because he works for free and he eats and eats and eats. As a last resort, you can go ahead and use the chemical control, but you want to be sure you're using the softest chemical control. Again, like insecticidal soap, horticulture oils, something that's going to go ahead and take care of the problem without damaging any of the beneficial insects that are in the area. Okay, now we're going to get on to diseases. And with diseases, you have 3 main diseases. You have bacteria, you have fungal diseases, and you have viruses. Now, this is a really cool drawing that Dr. Dave Clement wrote, and I love the fact that he signed it, so I can go ahead and show it off. And I love the way that the disease triangle basically says, if you have a plant that can get a disease, here's how it's going to happen. So your host is the plant, whether it's a tree or a shrub or a weed, you have the plant. The plant could be susceptible or not as susceptible, but it could be. And then you have the pathogen. This could be a bacteria. This could be a fungus or a virus. Now the bacteria or the fungus or the virus will be in the area. It lives in the area, or it will be arriving in the area of the, maybe say an insect or something like that. So it's kind of like, oh my gosh, they're always there. Fungal spores are always in the air, but they don't always attack the plants because the 3rd leg of the disease triangle right here is in the environment. So like for instance, early in the springtime, if you have a beautiful old sycamore tree, oh my gosh, they're so gorgeous. I've had people call me in the early spring, I have a 300-year-old sycamore and it's dying. I'm like, nope, it's got sycamore anthracnose. The disease is specific to that particular plant. There are lots of different anthracnose, but that one is sycamore anthracnose. It attacks the leaves and it shrivels up the leaves, and it also gets on the branches too. But what it does is it really works on the leaves, and the new leaves come out and it gets attacked, and more new leaves come out and it gets attacked. But as soon as the temperature gets warmer, as soon as that sunshine gets up and the temperatures go into the 70s, that disease no longer works. So the environmental part is over. That means that the disease cannot attack the tree. That means that the leaves can go ahead and expand and expand. And if a sycamore is happy, sometimes those leaves can get to be the size of dinner plates. Okay. Now, bacteria are different than fungi. Bacteria has to be in a living organism. So it could be in a plant, it could be in a bug or something like that. It has to have something that's going to keep it alive. Funguses, like I say, the spores can go ahead and be in the air. There's also types of spores that can be in the ground for a couple of years. And viruses, yeah, they have to be in a living thing too. So viruses are usually introduced to plants via an insect vector. So what kind of diseases we have? Okay, bacteria. When I think of bacteria, I think, first of all, see this potato right here? Have you ever smelled a rotten potato? Oh, It's horrible. The name of that particular bacteria is Erwinia carotarva. So apparently somebody first found it on carrots. So Erwinia is a bacteria. And the things that I know about bacteria is they like it to be damp. So that's perfect in the springtime, or with, some sort of fruits or vegetables or something like that. It always has a smell, and the smell is never pleasant. Ooh. And it can do an awful lot of things. So right here in the upper right-hand corner, this is Sycamore anthracnose. And notice how the foliage is all getting nasty on here. And it's just wilting off and falling apart. This right here is what they call crown gall. So the bacteria is making the gall. Now, what's interesting about this is it only lasts for a short time, and it lasts long enough to kill the plant, but it might not come back the next year. It just depends. Now, here's another thing that bacteria does. It can get into the xylem, which is remember xylem up and phloem down. Xylem brings the water and the nutrients up. Phloem brings the sugars down. What it does is it gets into the xylem and it plugs up the xylem. And, the plant cannot get the water up. So the plant wilts and dies. But if a bug comes by and feeds off that plant, you can go to another plant and share the bacteria. Not what you want. So here's another plant bacterial disease right here. This is a Rudbeckia disease. They have one that is a fungal disease. It looks very, very similar, but this is a bacterial disease. Angular leaf spots and slightly slimy. Now this one right here is also bacteria, and it affects trees. How many of you guys still have Bradford pears? And this also attacks crab apples, basically all the trees in the rose family, the Rosacea family. So the major thing you want to see here is that it's going to have blackening leaves, but you have this shepherd's crook right here. This is a really good sign of the bacteria. And also bacteria oozes out. So one of the ways you can find out if you have bacteria, you can cut something and pull it apart very slowly. And all the pathologists will tell you, if you do it right, you'll see the bacterial stream. And I'm like, I've never been that lucky, but I'm still working on it. Now, fungal diseases, these are a little bit drier, which is nice. So you still see a leaf spot disease right here. And it has, a funky look here. And this one is going along the veins. So this is actually very, very dangerous for that, because this means it's going to take out the whole leaf. So you have leaf spots. Now this is a box of blight. So you have lots of different leaf spots here, but you also have cankers too. So sometimes they follow the veins of the leaves. Sometimes they're in the leaves, and sometimes they're in the actual stems. Sometimes they're only on top of the leaves. This is powdery mildew. It's actually on top of the leaf. And one of the ways to control this is to use horticulture oil. And the oil puts a covering over top of the leaf. And when the fungal spore lands on it, it doesn't recognize that surface as a leaf. Go figure. Now, some funguses are really colorful. And this is a rusty red color, so I bet you all know what this is. Give me a guess. I hope you're saying rust. Okay, good. So the other thing that funguses do is they do all kinds of different leaf spots. So this is a peony, and it's a very, very old one. It's not resistant to this particular plant disease. And so what you'll have are these little circular spots. You'll have kind of like a halo around it, and then a dead spot. So it starts in the center, and then like throwing a pebble into the pond, you have these circles and circles and circles, and that's what happens here. So when you have something like that, the best thing to do as soon as you see it is prune it out. Once it's fully established, it's never going to be out of here. So the thing to do about these, if you love peonies, and I do, is you buy resistant peonies, because they have some that are resistant. Now this guy right here, this is actually an azalea, and notice how the leaves are very thin, like it should be. But this one all of a sudden has these real thick, almost rubbery leaves. So this is a fungal gall. This is Expeditium gall. So what it does is it turns the leaf from a leaf into a gall, which is amazing. And as soon as the foliage goes from this green color to this white color, that means that these spores are starting to get around to be spread. So you want to make sure to get rid of them. And basically what you do is you cut this off. There's no chemical controls. Cut it off and put it in a bag and send the bag to the landfill. Okay, so on more fungal diseases. I ran out in my garden today and I found, I have some daylilies that have a susceptibility to daylily streak. Well, this is a fungal daylily streak right here. And it starts as a small brown area first. And then it continues down the midrib, and it just makes the daylilies really, really nasty. Some of them have more of an issue with it than others. And there's a lot that are resistant. So if you are a daylily fan, don't just look at the daylily for the flowers, because the flowers are spectacular. And don't just look at them because they're rebloomers, because that is really awesome. But also take a look to see if they're really susceptible or just slightly susceptible to this daylily streak. Best way to take care of this is every fall, clean out those dead leaves, get rid of every single one of them to remove the amount of spores that are there. Okay, so this is one of my irises, and it has these little teeny spots here. They start out like a little teeny wet spot, and it's sort of a halo, and the halo gets bigger, and eventually you get a tan dead spot right there, surrounded by this brown, surrounded by halo. So that's how this particular fungus gets going. And this is moved around, as is the daylily streak, by rain. So every time you have rain and raindrops bounce and pounce and move around, and you have lots of wind and all that kind of stuff, man, all those spores get shared with everything out there. Okay, and the last disease is viruses. Now, they're not just viruses, because Aspergillus is not truly a virus. It's got like one DNA missing or something like that. But it is just as dangerous in terms of the fact that when you have a virus, you need to dig up the plant. And that can be so hard to do. So with this one, this is a beautiful purple coneflower that's white. With Aspergillus, the foliage starts to turn yellow. The other thing you'll notice is the plant slows down, really slows down. It doesn't thrive. Everything else is growing like gangbusters, and this is just sort of sitting there going, ugh. And the next thing you notice is, instead of having these beautiful white petals, what's this? All these green petals. It's not supposed to be green. Well, the reason why they're green, I think, is because the plant's just trying to do its best to grow. And then look here, right at the top over here, this part of the flower is trying to put out more flowers. And quite often I've seen like a purple coneflower here with multiple little teeny tiny itty bitty flowers coming up on it. And yeah, it looks really cool. But because this disease is spread by leafhoppers and other plant pests, mostly leafhoppers, and they're everywhere, as soon as you see something like this, dig it up, put it in a plastic bag. Do not put it in a compost. Tie it up tight, throw it away. The other one is this mosaic. There's lots of different types of mosaics and different types of viral diseases. One thing I want you to see is there are some areas here, like right there, and a couple in here, where you have an island of green. There's a little island of green there too, completely surrounded by this yellow. And that is a real good indicator. There's all kinds of other different things on it too. But the thing is, as soon as you see it, you need to get rid of it. Now, since we have really gone gung-ho and fully embraced knockout roses, I don't have knockout roses, but I have fully embraced the drift roses. They're smaller, easier to contain, not as thorny to me. But anyways, they're all susceptible. All roses are susceptible to the virus called rose rosette. So what does it do? Well, it changes the color of the plant. Remember, this one was yellow, and then all the flowers sort of turned kind of greenish one. This plant right here turned yellow also. What this one does, it turns the foliage more red. So basically, it's cutting off the chlorophyll, and the foliage is already red to begin with. So the other thing it does is it creates what they call a witch's broom. So all the foliage, instead of spreading out like this, they're all kind of together and doing all this thing like all at once. That's a witch's broom. And the other thing they'll do is all of a sudden you'll notice that, boy, that thing is thorny. I mean, yes, roses are thorny, but this is like extra thorny. Plus, sometimes those thorns are not real prickly. That's sort of weird. But anyways, so as soon as you see that, you need to dig that up. The little critter that gets that going from place to place is a little teeny aphid mite. And the aphid mite is so tiny that you need an electron microscope. So even your handy dandy microscope would not work for that one. So dig it up. The good news is, if that's the only one that has it, you can dig it up and put it in a bag right away. Actually, the best thing to do is put the bag around the plant, dig the plant up, and then throw it away in the trash. And you can go ahead and plant another rose right after it, because the rose rosette virus has to only be in a live plant. And as soon as you've dug it up, all those roots are going to die. So any new plant you can put in that doesn't have rosette already will be able to thrive. So again, you want to know the lifestyle of the fungus. So as soon as you see a problem, you want to identify it as soon as you can to control it. Sometimes you want to go ahead and physically cut something out. I know in the beginning when we didn't know much about rose rosette, we did a lot of pruning of this right here. It didn't work, but we tried. And then the biological controls. Well, there's a lot of things that can control things. And there could be things to control the diseases. I don't know that much that's going to control biologically the diseases, but there are chemical controls. Now, most of the time, a fungicide will only go ahead and be a protective coating on it. Now, notice I said fungicide because the bacteria, the only bactericide they want to use on fruit trees, and it's a streptomycin, just like we take if we have a bacterial infection. Really expensive, not something you want to use just on your annual plants. And on viruses, we don't have any cures for viruses, but we do have lots of protection for funguses. So you want to go ahead and check which fungicides would work and how they would work. But remember also, you can probably go ahead and use horticulture oil for some things like powdery mildew, not downy, but powdery mildew. Okay, so other kind of pests. Oh my gosh, you think, oh, is this ever going to end? Well, there's lots of different kinds of rodents that can be pests. Things like voles and moles and mice. Well, moles really are a pest, but they're a pest of insects because a mole with an M is a meat eater, and they like things like earthworms and grubs. So they're actually doing you a favor if you have grubs, Japanese beetle grubs, because they're going to eat them all up. Of course, they're going to destroy your lawn at the same time, but you know, details. But voles are really bad. They can have 3 to 5 babies every 3 or 4 months, all through the year. So these are like little mice, very small. And what they do is they eat a lot of stuff. So this guy on the far right over here, you can see how this was a beautiful sweet shrub. And they have gone ahead and gnawed all the bark off of it. They usually go for the bark in the fall when there's not a lot there. Best time to take care of them is with a mouse trap. Bait it with an apple or an apple with peanut butter. You want to do this in the fall and the winter. You also want to make sure you put a heavy clay pot over top of that mouse trap so you're not endangering any critters outside of what you're doing. You want to always put the trap near a place where the voles have been very active, maybe like near maybe one of your fruit trees, or if you have some really tasty hosta or daylily, all those are very, very tempting. When you think about it, during the spring, summer, and fall, those roots are full of sugar because the phloem always brings down sugar to the roots. But in the fall, those sugars turn to starches. And the voles are going, this isn't as tasty. And that's why that slice of apple will work. Now, yes, you're going to have to rebait that mouse trap every single time you catch one. So the other alternative is something that I learned from Longwood Gardens, and you can go ahead and hire yourself some hunting cats. These are outdoor house cats, and you have to feed them, make sure that they're well fed. I asked them how did they pay their cats, and they say all the kibble they could eat. But I have 2 cats. They're very healthy. They've had their shots. They've been neutered. They do not go for birds because I have voles, and they do a good job with the voles. So those are the things you want to go ahead and control with rodents. Now, birds, a lot of times people say, well, how do birds be a problem? Well, if you have a young tree, like say a young evergreen, and the bird likes to land on the topmost part of it, it can actually break that top part. So instead of having a perfect Christmas tree kind of look, you have one a little strange. So if you have a bird that lands on that, the best thing to do is when your evergreen is growing first and it's very young and tender and easy to get to, go ahead and put a bamboo pole over top of it so that the bamboo pole is higher than the tip of the evergreen growing spot. So the bird will land on the bamboo pole and not bother the other part of the tree. The other type of bird that can be a problem is a sapsucker. And this is my sugar maple. The reason why the bark is black is sugar maples have a lot of sugar in their sap. And what grows on sugar sap? Sooty mold. So sooty mold is growing on this, but this gave me a great opportunity this spring when I saw this beautiful row of new sapsucker holes here and new sapsucker holes here. I could go ahead and say, hey, look, this is my sapsucker. This is a migrating bird, sorry, and it flies from the south up to the north early in the springtime. It's illegal to kill it, even though it might make you really, really mad. Usually it lands early in the morning. You never, ever see it. I've looked, I've never seen it, but I'm sure you can see it. What's nice about it though, is once it makes those little holes and the sap comes out of that, of course, the maple syrup from the maple, the sugar maple is always tasty for those birds. So the birds will be there. Migratory birds coming up after the sapsucker will enjoy them. Little insects will come in and they'll enjoy the sap. Other insects get drowned in the sap, so other birds will come by and get a protein snack. So it really is a good thing as long as the tree is large enough to deal with it. So that's important. And then there's deer. And I will tell you this, deer can only be a problem depending on the number of deer that you have in the area that you're in and what's available for them to eat. And what they'll do is, like this picture right here, they'll eat all this foliage down until there's nothing here. And they have eaten my phlox, they have eaten my hosta, they have eaten absolutely everything, because where I live in the country, there was nothing for them to eat anywhere around for almost 5 miles, except for my garden. I'm using liquid fence this coming year. So there are different controls you can use for them. If you have a tree that you don't want the sapsuckers to land on, you can go ahead and put, like, say, a mesh on top of it, and that would probably help. If you're planting hosta and daylilies, and you don't have the ability to have a hunting cat like I do, you can go ahead and buy a container that is like a plastic mesh or a wire mesh, and you can put your plant in that and plant the whole mesh basket so that the plant right height, but the vole will not be able to eat it because it's not going to go through that wire mesh. All kinds of non-chemical controls. Okay, there's other things that can be a problem, not just insects and diseases and critters. It's called abiotic, and they could look like a disease. Like, for instance, take a look at this lawn right here. I know that the guy who gave this picture to me was so upset. He said, what in the world? The guy who does my lawn, he just killed my lawn. What in the world did he spray? Did he spray a chemical on it? I said, no, it was really hot. It was hot and it was dry. This is what they call an abiotic relationship, because this was actually caused by mowing the lawn when the grass was too dry and drought stressed. And it actually squished the lawn, broke it up. And luckily, the lawn roots were still pretty good. So it came right back the next year, but that lawnmower gentleman lost the job. So I love this picture of this weather, because sometimes the weather has so much to do with a lot of other things. It can bring you drought. It can bring you too much water. And when I say too much water, every time I listen to one of Dr. Dave Clement's talk, he often has a picture of an American pine, white pine, and it is sitting in water. And he said, I took this picture right away, right after it rained, because the plants were sitting in water. The next day, the water was gone. But those plants were sitting in water for at least a day, and they don't like that. And the next year, they were dead. So sometimes you have to keep an eye on everything around yourself, and you have to make note of what was going on. Frost can really do a lot of damage. I love this picture because, I mean, that was really beautiful. That's why I took the picture. But frost can go ahead and damage the new tiny shoots of things and deform them too. So too much water, not enough water, too hot, not enough heat. All these things can go ahead and adversely harm your plants. And you think, oh my gosh, but it's not a disease. So sometimes we do things ourselves. I call it garden error, and it's human, and it's okay, because it's the more we know, the better off we are. So this one right here, upper right, this little plant right here was growing as well as it could. But notice how these roots were just kind of like circling. So what happened was, this was in a very tiny pot when it first got started. And anytime you plant an annual, biannual, or herbaceous perennial, especially herbaceous perennial, you want to make sure you tease those roots open so that they stop circling the wagon or circling themselves, because this is what will happen. They'll circle and they will actually strangle themselves. You don't want to do that, okay? Now, on soil fertility or soil pH, this is a tomato plant. It looks like a disease, but this is called end spot of tomatoes, or black end spot of tomatoes. It looks like a disease. But what happens is, with this one, the pH was not high enough. So it needed to have a higher pH. What do you do when you add, what do you add for a higher pH? You add lime. Well, part of what lime is made of calcium and magnesium. Calcium is needed in the tomato, in the root zone of the tomato when it first starts growing, because that's a huge chemical. It's a huge molecule. And it takes a lot to get it up the stem and into the flower and then into the fruit. So with this, if you've added the lime, but you added it late instead of before you planted the plants, it will eventually get there and you won't have that blossom end rot. I'm sorry, it was called blossom end rot. But the first couple of tomatoes might have that. And I know that every time that I'm putting tomatoes in the ground, I keep saying to myself, did I put the lime down first? Yes, okay, good. So the other thing you can go ahead and not have the right fertility. You want to have the balanced amount of fertility. And to have a balanced amount of fertility, you have to have the soil pH be exactly right. Because if the soil pH is too acidic, it can have some of the micronutrients may not be available and some might be available too much. If you have the soil acidity be too high, too alkaline, then in that sense, you again might have some of the micronutrients too high or too low. So right here on the lower left, this is a sycamore and it's showing signs of zinc deficiency. Now this could also be a herbicide, but this looks more like a zinc or an iron deficiency right here. And this right here is actually a nitrogen deficiency of chrysanthemums. So this could have been because, you know, it's in the container, or excuse me, this is in a container right now on plastic. If they had like a rain event or maybe a hurricane with like 5 inches of rain like we had a couple of weeks ago, that rain can actually take all the nutrients and wash it right out of the soil profile or the root profile. So you always want to do your research. You want to go ahead and make sure you know, how does it grow? What does it need? What does it need? Sun? Does it need shade? Does it need a lot of nutrients? Does it need wet soil? Does it need dry soil? A lot of our herbaceous perennials thrive in soil that's just ordinary garden soil. And if you over fertilize, they grow, they flop, they look like, oh. So they'll keep in mind, some of these things don't need a lot. And you also have to figure out how dangerous is this pest? And I don't mean like, for instance, poison ivy bad. I mean, how much can you deal with? Can you deal with like 1 or 2 spots on your plants? Or can you deal with like just a couple more spots or a couple bugs? Like for instance, if you have aphids and you want to go ahead and get rid of the aphids, there are a zillion aphids. Well, you can't pick them off, but you can go ahead and turn a hose on and wash them off with a strong spray of water. And then keep your eye out for ladybugs, because when they start coming in, you're not going to have to worry about aphids. The other thing is learn the life cycle. Some insects can have 1 generation, or some can have more. We've already talked about that. Remember the disease triangle. You've got to have the disease present. You've got to have the plant that is really, really susceptible to it. And then you have to have the right environmental conditions, the right atmosphere, the right amount of humidity and heat. And you also have to know what stage you can go ahead and use to the most economically and safely get rid of that pest. So Mother Nature can help. If the temperatures go up, you can go ahead and not have to worry. If you have rain, sometimes that washes things out. A lot of rain will wash aphids totally off. Your wind can be a friend too. You can blow aphids off. We live between the Chesapeake and I live between the Chesapeake and the Atlantic Ocean, but a lot of you guys live between the Chesapeake and lots of these rivers. So that actually sets up different ways that the pests can go ahead and survive. It also helps or prevents the predators or the pathogens that can go ahead. And also, you have to think of the food supply that the pest wants. So if it's an insect, the pest wants to eat your plants. If it's a deer, that pest wants to eat your plants. So you need to know what kind of food supply you have for that pest and how you can go ahead and control it. So what can you do? You can do culture controls. You can go ahead and make sure that your plant is as happy as it can be. You can plant your azaleas where they get morning sun and afternoon shade so that the plant is not out there baking in the sun. If it's out there baking in the sun, it's going to get azalea lace bug. It's just going to get it. Sorry about that, guys. It's just going to get it. But if you have it in the afternoon shade, it's not going to get it as much. You can go ahead and do a mechanical control. That means pruning something off, digging something out, pulling something out, caging something out. Either way, that's a way to say, I'm taking care of it. Biological control, making sure that you have lots and lots of flowering plants that have lots of flowers, obviously, that will invite a lot of the beneficial insects. Remember, lots of times the adult is just a pollinator, but their larvae, my goodness, they are hungry, hungry predators. And you want them there, but they'll only come if you have the flowers. And then notice last is chemical control. And you still want to go ahead with the soft chemical control first. use the insecticidal soaps, use the horticulture oil. I can go ahead and use liquid fence to keep the deer away. I don't have to be out there shooting them. You can use a chemical control at the last resort. So choosing the right plant, that means the plant that you want. Choosing the right place. Well, the best place to put the plant. So here's one of my hibiscus. I love this plant. It's absolutely gorgeous. Notice it has all these Japanese beetles chomping away. So what do? I plant this plant far enough away that I don't see all that nasty foliage, but close enough that I get to see those gorgeous flowers. The other thing is if I'm going to go ahead and help my house, I'm going to plant shade trees that are going to be on the south or west, mostly on the west, because that's going to shade my house, cool my house down. But if I live out in the country like I do, and I have lots and lots of wind, I go ahead and I planted a barrier of trees, evergreen trees on the north and the west side to slow down that wind so that I can go ahead and protect my plants. You also need to have resources. So the first resources I put out here is your Master Gardener Handbook, because it's got amazing photographs of the pests, the insect pests, the disease pests, and what you can do, and some of the controls. So it's really, really good to go ahead, be familiar with it. Look at those pictures, familiarize yourself with it. It is perfect. It's a perfect resource. Then also there's the IPM news alerts, and I'm sure Master Gardeners do get them. If you don't, you can go to extension, here's just a horrible thing, but extension.umd.edu, programs, agriculture, food systems, programs, areas, ornamental horticulture, IPM alert, nursery and landscapes. But anyways, that comes out every single week, and it has what is happening this particular week, what kind of insects are out there, what kind of diseases are out there, what's going on, abiotic and all that kind of stuff. Cicadas are gone, I think, right? Not here. We don't have any. Another type of resource you can have are things like weeds. So I love this one, Plant Invaders of the Mid-Atlantic. This is the brand new copy, and I know a lot of the Master Gardener coordinators are getting them already for you guys. Weeds of the Northeast, that's the one in the far right. This is, I talked to the guy who wrote it. He's thinking of updating it right now, but right now this is still an excellent resource. And then when you're talking about weeds, well, I know this kind of sounds crazy, but the Golden Book, wow, this is an oldie but a goodie. There's also the Biological Control of Insects and Mite Pests of Woody Landscape. Oh, this is wonderful, because this gives you the biological controls, which ones you should look for, what you should plant to get them there so you don't have to be out there with sprays. And this is a really great one, Pests and Diseases of Herbaceous Perennials. Yep, it doesn't do anything for trees, but boy, it really helps you figure out what to do about for your beautiful herbaceous perennials. So I'm a little over, but I hope I covered everything.
Yes, absolutely. That was super thorough. I'm totally okay with the timing, and I think lots of folks learned a lot too. So I think we're good on timing. And we still actually do have time for our Q&A. So well done.
Awesome.
All right, folks. So we're going to go ahead and get to the questions that were already in our Q&A box. If you didn't get a chance to submit it during the presentation, now's the time. All right, so the first question that we have is, what is the best way to keep Japanese beetles off of evening primrose plants?
Okay, again, it's difficult to keep the adults off of anything. So I do have a friend who loves roses, and she actually put, I guess it's a floating row cover, wrapped it around her rose, and the rose basically held it in place. So she put a cover over top of it that prevented the Japanese beetles from landing on it. She also was able to open it up and cut roses and display her roses at home that way, and also go to rose shows. So that was pretty cool. So I guess you could do that in the evening primrose also, but I think that would be more difficult than anything else. What I would do is take a look at how you keep your lawn. And I know that sounds crazy, but when you think about it, a Japanese beetle, when it lays its eggs in the lawn. And if the lawn is irrigated on a daily basis or every other day, that lawn stays pretty moist usually. And that's perfect for the Japanese beetle, because you can lay your egg very nicely, and the beetle will stay nice and moist as it hatches out, and it can easily go on down into the soil as it matures and goes from a little baby larva to the bigger larva. Whereas if you don't irrigate your lawn and it's the heat of summer, which it is in August, and the beetle lays its eggs, well, it could just dry out. So sometimes you might want to think about, I don't need to have the greenest lawn in the neighborhood.
Wonderful. Okay, what's the best way to remove squash beetle eggs from the underside of the leaf? Scraping them off damages the leaf.
Well, yeah, it does, but you could go ahead and put on a pair of gloves and just kind of like lightly squish them.
Yeah.
Or you could go ahead and brush them if you wanted to, like get a paintbrush, one of those little disposable paintbrushes or fiber paintbrush, and brush them off into soapy water.
Okay. The next question is, do fabric pots really prevent girdling by allowing air pruning?
I would say yes, because I have seen that done. But I don't know. I mean, I'm using one of those for my tomato plants right now, and it's doing a very, very good job. But I have seen research that says that it does work. What I would do, though, is when you take it out of the plant, out of the pot, take a look at it, see if it does have roots all the way out to the edge and that are not winding. Because you can see when you take a plant out of a plastic pot or a clay pot, you can see those roots that are circling. And if you don't see that circling, you're good to go.
Awesome. Okay, the next one is how to deal with cucumber beetles on Montauk daisies.
Oh my goodness. Wow, there's a lot of, well, you have the striped cucumber beetle and the spotted cucumber beetle. And I would say insecticidal soap. Because it's very, very difficult. I mean, they fly, so they're going to be flying all around. And
Yes.
they definitely love the daisies, because daisies are definitely yummy. So I would just kind of stay on top of that. Maybe make sure that you plant your cucumbers far away.
Yes. In a related question to that answer, what is the difference between insecticidal soap and horticultural oil, and when would you suggest using each one of them?
Okay, that is a good question.
Yeah,
Horticultural soap is actually a soap that is mixed in with water, and it is one that has been, through research, shown not to damage the plant. But still, read the label to make sure that every plant that you're going to be spraying will be okay with it. So what it does is it works on the soft-bodied insects like aphids and little baby caterpillars and stuff like that. It can work on the adults, but it takes a lot longer. What it does is it kind of dissolves some of the skin or the chitin around it, and so opens up little teeny wounds. And now, if it was you and I, and we had a small wound like that, and it didn't heal, what would we do? We'd go to our doctor or the hospital and get it taken care of. I don't see bug hospitals anywhere. Okay, horticulture oil. That is like a gallon of water to usually 1 or 2 tablespoons of oil. And it's not, vegetable oil, although you can use neem oil, and there are other type of oils that are possible to use. Always read the directions. But what you do is you put them in a pump up sprayer, and because it's very difficult to mix oil and water together. And what it does, that little bit of oil just on the leaf is like a little sheen. So it kind of shows the bug that it's not a leaf. It tricks the bug into thinking it's not a leaf. And again, like I said, for the powdery mildew, it tricks the powdery mildew spore not to germinate on that leaf because it doesn't see itself as a leaf. Now, with horticulture oil, there are things like the dwarf Alberta spruce that do not like it. And I think Japanese maples do not like it. So read the label. The label is the law. You have to be reading it to know what you can and cannot use it on.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay, so our next question, I actually haven't heard this one before. It's interesting in theory. I don't know if we're the best people to answer it, but we can try. Can I use my expired vitamins for my plants? For example, can I dissolve calcium tablets in water? I use old green powders for fertilizer and it works well for my plants, but I'm not sure about using multivitamins.
Well, okay, a multivitamin is actually designed for people. And so it has things in it that maybe a plant would not necessarily need. So I would say that's probably not a good use for the plants, simply because it's not going to be in a form that the plants could probably figure out. Now, calcium, yeah, you can go ahead and take old calcium tablets and dissolve them in water, or it's like putting eggshells in the soil. It's going to take them a long time to break down into the calcium molecule that the plants can use. I know a lot of people say, oh, if you're going to plant tomatoes, put down a whole bunch of eggshells and then put those tomatoes right on top of it. That's not going to work for another 5-6 years. It takes a long time for those eggshells to break down. So with your calcium tablets, along with the eggshells, let it, put them in the compost.
That makes sense. All right, so we've got a couple more. What is the best control for grasshoppers on Sun King?
Whoa, grasshoppers are really, really bad. Again, with the grasshoppers, the best thing to try to do is to control them early if you can. The other thing is to keep the grass cut, keep the weeds down, because they hide in that kind of stuff. I know that, we used to have a nursery and the grass would get really tall. Whoa, do we have grasshoppers? Got rid of the nursery. We kept the grass mowed nicely. And the number of mosquitoes dropped, the number of dragonflies bloom, thank goodness, because the dragonflies are doing a great job with those mosquitoes. But the number of the grasshoppers reduced itself also. Now keep in mind that grasshoppers grow as long as it gets being really, really hot and dry. They will continue to grow and grow, and they go from one stage to the other. They just get bigger and bigger and bigger. It's the same shape, but just larger and larger and larger.
All right, so we're getting a lot of specifics here.
Okay.
The next one is, how do you remove lace bugs from aster plants?
Lace bugs, aster plants. Now, are you talking lace wings? Because lace wings are good bugs, but lace bugs, no, that's not good. Actually, you can go ahead and use a strong spray of water. That will really knock them off. I know that sounds crazy, but I mean, you can, because they're on the underside of the leaf, but you can go ahead and spray the water and then spray it underneath and just whoosh, and there they go.
Does work.
Yes.
Would horticultural oil work to confuse Japanese beetles on your leaves?
No, no, sorry. They're just, they're adults. They figured that one out.
All right. I have Pleoblastus that's invaded my bed of epimedium. How can you eliminate that?
I'm sorry, you had what?
Pleoblastus?
That's a bamboo, Ginny.
Oh, thank you. Okay, wow. Because I was going, I know I've heard that before. All right, bamboo. Okay, bamboo has one season of growth. So it grows like gangbusters from early spring until like about the middle of May or May. And then at that point, it stops expanding and then it starts growing upwards. So you have the opportunity after that to go ahead and dig out what's there and just get rid of it. Just keep getting it smaller and smaller. But the other thing you can do, like any type of woody plant, you can go ahead and cut it as much as you can down to the ground and then paint the top of it with undiluted glyphosate, which is Roundup. Now, again, you're going to have to wear the proper protective equipment, gloves, I would say for sure. Make sure you have a container that's shorter and fatter than it is tall, so you don't want it to spill over. I always suggest going ahead and putting a drop of food coloring. Dr. Betty Morose came up with this idea, and it is wonderful. So if you go ahead and just paint the top of it after you've gone ahead and cut everything back, then the plant will go ahead and take that glyphosate down into the roots, thinking, oh, well, I'm pulling in all the sugar water that the leaves are supposed to be giving me, and it'll take it down to the roots and it'll kill it. Now, sometimes it'll take a long time to kill. It depends on how large that group of bamboo is. If it's just a beginning one, then it's easier to control. But if it's been there for a couple of years, you're going to have to take a couple of years of working at it, but you can do that.
Okay. And this person says it might be a question for another webinar, but Ginny, I know you've got this because I've heard you talk about it. What's the best way to deal with herbicide drift, particularly from dicamba? Is there a good way to tell the difference between chemical damage and biotic damage?
Wow. Yes, there is definitely specific look to herbicide damage. And I deal with that on a yearly basis in the spring because I'm surrounded by farm. So the guy across the street from me always sprays 2,4-D and dicamba, and the guys all around me do the same thing. They try not to do it on my property, but sometimes they have to for controlling the mare's tail, and I understand that. But if I know that they're going to do it and I know that it's coming in my direction, if I have the ability to hose down the plant, I do. But if I don't have that ability, I just try to keep the plant watered as well as I can so I can outgrow that. So usually they try to do it as minor as they can so that it's not going to kill my trees. They know that I love my trees and they don't want to make me mad. So yeah, so the difference between that and anything else, you know, for instance, dicamba and 2,4-D, they will elongate the leaf. It will kind of like, instead of being out like this, it'll be really narrow and stretchy. Now, glyphosate or Roundup, you'll actually have a totally different look. It'll be a clump of little itty bitty leaves, like it's just trying to grow. And if you're using something like, or somebody has used something like a soil sterilant, the plant will have no leaves and then they'll start to grow with itty bitty leaves, and the leaves will be like, you know, not even a quarter of an inch, and then it'll die. And then it'll try to keep outputting more and more until it's totally dead.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay, and then the last one, unless there's any last minute ones that folks want to send in, is what plants are best treated by horticultural oil?
Oh my goodness. I would say that any type of plant that you have that you need a protection from, like, say, I would say powdery mildew or something like that. And also it could probably also go ahead and get rid of things like mites. It's great for small aphids and other very, very small insects like that. And I do say mites, which are actually in the spider family. What I would do is always read the label. I would say almost every tree, every shrub, every herbaceous perennial could deal with it, but that's just blanket statement. So what you need to do is you need to go ahead and read the label and make sure, like for instance, the Japanese maple, the dwarf Alberta spruce do not like it, but most of them can handle it pretty well. So you have to figure that out. So the dwarf Alberta spruce, does it get bagworms? Yes. Does it get mites? Oh my gosh, it gets the spruce spider mite in the springtime. It gets the let's see now, the two-spotted spider mite in the summer, and then the southern red mite blows up with a wind. That's a weather gift to us. And so you really do need to use horticulture oil. So what you need to do is you actually reduce the amount of oil in it, and it will work on that without killing or damaging the tree. Now, if you use horticulture oil on a blue spruce or any of the blue junipers or like blue atlas cedars, it actually turns the blue plants into green plants.
Nice. Awesome. So it looks like we're going to look at a combination of not just the plant, but also the issue that's going on with it before we use horticultural oils.
Absolutely.
Awesome. All right, so that was our last question, and we are ending pretty much right on time. So with that, I want to wrap it up and say thank you so much to you, Ginny. That was just a plethora of helpful information. It was so good to have it. And again, as a reminder to folks, we have recorded this, and so we will make this available online for you and any of your colleagues who didn't get to watch tonight. They'll be able to watch again later on. So again, thanks so much to Ginny. You're saving our plants, saving our landscapes, and we so much appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And I really love sharing the little bit of knowledge that I have.
Absolutely. We'll have you anytime. So at this point, I'll stop the recording.